Welcome back to Big Nick's Meats and Treats. Today we're going to do the mother of meats, the brisket. I've been talking about it for the last couple days. What I have here is almost a 19-pound full packer brisket. Packer brisket means it has both the point and the flat. It's two separate muscles. It's basically the front shoulder and the chest of the cow. Typically a very, very tough piece of meat, and that's the main reason that we're going to cook this low and slow. When I pick a brisket, I usually try to get prime or choice. Okay, that's going to indicate the level of marbling that's within the meat. Prime or choice are going to also come out the best and be the most moist when you're done. When I look for a brisket, I like the point the most because the point is the fattiest and it's juiciest. It's real good. So I look for one that's got a big point. I look for one that's got some flex to it. It's not real stiff. So I look for that. I also look to make sure that the flat is pretty uniform in size at the end. If it's real thin on one side and real thick on the other, you're going to end up having to cut that all off anyway to make it even so it doesn't burn. And then I take a look at the fat cap side to see how much fat is on there, to see how much waste I'm going to have, because when you're paying by the pound and you end up trimming off all that fat, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to cut the package open and I'm going to trim this brisket down. And when I trim it, I'm going to be trimming off all the fat that looks like candle wax. There's going to be some real hard fat that looks like candle wax. So I'm going to trim off as much of that as possible. And then on the fat cap side, I'm going to trim this down to about 1/4 inch of fat all the way across the top. And anything else, I'm going to cut it off. I'm kind of OCD about how much it's going to weigh when I'm done. So when I do the trimmings, I actually weigh my trimmings, because even though I bought almost a 19-pound brisket, by the time I get done trimming this, it might only be 14 pounds. And that gives me an indication of time of how long it's going to take to cook. Typically, it's going to be about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes to cook a brisket per pound after it's trimmed. So I like to weigh the trimmings to know how much the brisket's going to weigh when I'm done. So let me trim this up and we'll get back to you in a little bit. When you're getting ready to trim the brisket, make sure it's really cold. Not frozen, but really cold. Because if you don't, the fat's going to be real gummy and it's going to be hard to cut. Alright, we got the brisket out of the wrapper now, and it is a giant piece of meat. A lot of people are really intimidated by briskets because A, they cost a lot of money, it's a big piece of meat, and if you screw it up, it doesn't taste very good. It's like eating a shoe leather. So a lot of people are intimidated by it. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I've done about a dozen of briskets. I've had some wins and I've had some failures. I'm going to show you guys the way that I do it, and we'll go from there. I usually do low and slow, and I do Texas style, which just means salt and pepper only. I don't put any other elaborate seasonings on it or anything. And you can see when I open this brisket here, there's a fat side and a side that's not quite as fatty. So a lot of your hard fat is going to be on the fat side here, and I'm going to use a real sharp boning knife, and you can see just big huge pieces of waxy fat. That stuff is not going to render out, so you want to cut all that stuff off and cut that down to where you got about 1/4 inch of fat. If there's big loose flaps of meat like this, just cut those off. Put it in your scrap. Same over here, there's a little bit. So I'm going to just trim this down to there's about 1/4 inch of fat, and then I'll get back to you in a little bit. Alright, welcome back. I'm almost done with the trim, and you can see I got a lot of trimmings. I'll weigh that here in a minute. One last thing that you need to do when you trim is you need to pay attention to where the grain is in the meat. Here you can see the grain is running this way. And what I'll usually do is I'll take my knife and I'll make a little bit of a hash mark opposite of what the grain is. Because sometimes after I get the bark on there, salt and pepper, and it's all cooked, I can't tell which way the grain is. And it makes a real big difference when it comes to slicing the brisket. So I'll do a little hash there opposite of what the grain is. I'm just about done with this. I'll weigh it and we'll get to seasoning it here in just a few minutes. Alright, I finished the trim. I weighed out my trimmings. They were at 4 pounds almost exactly. So I still have about 14.8 pounds of meat. At an hour to an hour and 15 minutes of cook time, that's going to be about a 14-hour cook. That's a ballpark figure. Now I'm ready to season. I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of kosher salt, and then a 1/4 cup of coarse ground pepper on a full packer brisket. I don't put them in the shaker at the same time because they weigh different weights and one will settle and one won't, so you'll get a whole bunch of salt or a whole bunch of pepper. So I'm doing them separate. So I'm going to put this on here real liberally. This is a huge, huge piece of meat. So you really, really want to cover it real liberally with the salt. And I'm going to wrap this up and put it on a cookie sheet and wrap it up real tight and keep it in the fridge for 6 to 12 hours to really allow that seasoning to work and get into the meat. And we'll flip it over here. Same thing on the other side. You know, you think a 1/4 cup of salt is a lot of salt, but for a piece of meat that's 15 pounds, it's really not. I got done with the salt, so now I'm going to put the pepper on. Again, it's a 1/4 cup of coarse ground black pepper. Same thing, I'm going to put it on very liberally. This is just going to impart so much flavor to a big piece of meat like this, and that's what gives you that good bark that you're looking for on a brisket. One of the #1 things that people do wrong when they're dealing with meat is they under-season, and we do not want to do that. So season it real generously. And when I get done putting this all on, I'm going to kind of just rub it on with my hands a little bit, make sure it gets in to the meat. Make sure you get all the edges. And then I'm just going to kind of rub this around a little bit with my hands, make sure it gets into the meat. Missed some in here. I want to rub that in a little bit. Same thing here, kind of just rub it into the meat a little bit. That black pepper is what gives a brisket just that amazing bark and flavor. All right, that's all done. Now I'm going to put this on a cookie sheet and I'm going to wrap it up real tight in saran wrap. It's 5:30 at night right now, and I'll probably put this on the smoker tomorrow around 8 or 8:30 in the morning. So that seasoning will sit on there and get into the meat real good. All right, it's the next morning. I finally decided to get out of bed, so I'm going to go ahead and put this brisket on. The temperature of the smoker is 225. I'm going to put the brisket on. And when I put it on the grill, I'm going to put the point on the left side because that's the thickest part of the meat. I put the fat side down this time. I generally do that just because I don't want it to burn where there's not as much fat. Then I'm going to put my probe in. When I put the probe in, I'm going to put it in the flat, but right at the edge of the point. Right in there. Okay. If you put the probe in the point, the flat will overcook. So I'm going to put this on 225, and when it gets to about 160 internal temperature, I'm going to wrap it. So we'll see in about 6 or 7 hours. All right, welcome back. We're done a little bit faster than I thought. We're at 160 degrees internal temperature. It took about 5 hours. So now I'm going to wrap it. Most of the time, I typically wrap with butcher paper. I'm actually trying something new this time. I'm going to try wrapping in foil. The difference between paper and foil: paper will allow the bark to stay more crisp and maintain moisture in the meat. Foil will allow it to even be moister, but the bark doesn't stay quite as crisp. So I'm going to try foil this time. We'll get it all wrapped up here. I'm going to do heavy duty foil, and I'm going to double wrap it. So get it all wrapped up, roll the edges over so it's nice and tight. I want it as tight as possible. Roll these all nice and tight. The good thing about having the foil too is it's going to allow me to save all the juices that come off of the meat, so I can make au jus when I'm done for the brisket. Okay, it's all wrapped up. I'm going to put it back on the smoker, and I'm going to put it on the smoker at 225 again until the internal temperature is between 195 and 200. So if you haven't noticed, I got some new outerwear here. Big Nick's Meats and Treats, given to me by my favorite daughter. Come on in, favorite daughter. She's my only daughter, but she's my favorite daughter. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is my Father's Day gift. A little bit early, but sporting the brand. There you go. So I'll put it back on until we're at 200-degree internal temperature. All right, welcome back. The brisket got done way faster than I expected. It got to target temperature of 203, and it got done in just a little over 7 hours. So I don't know if that was a function of the foil or what. So that surprised me. So I'm gonna cut this foil open a little bit and let this vent out just to get some of the steam out of there. Just for a minute or two. Ooh, man, that looks good. I'm gonna let that get the steam out, and then I'm gonna rewrap it. After this is done steaming for a couple minutes, I'm gonna rewrap it in the foil, and then I'm gonna put it in a cooler, completely wrapped in chef's towels, and let it rest in a cooler until the internal temperature gets to 145 degrees, and that's almost like a perfect slicing temperature. All right, welcome back 4 hours later after we've had it sitting in a cooler for 4 hours. I was hoping to get the temperature down to about 145, but I got tired of waiting. It was about 163, so I'm gonna go ahead and slice into it. First impressions taking it out of the foil. Like I said earlier, this is the first time I've ever done one with foil. It smells very good. Lots of juice that I was able to save for au jus. The bark is definitely not as crisp as it would be if I had done it in butcher paper. So I found the mark that I made with my knife when I was trimming it. So let's go ahead and slice into this thing and see how it looks. So again, you want to double check that you're going against the grain. And generally, I try to cut at about a pencil width slices. So I'll cut into this here. Get a few slices in there. Super nice smoke ring on there. So we're slicing it into it here. You can see a real nice smoke ring on here. And there's quite a bit of juice, and even in the flat, which is pretty good. Another thing you can do is just hold it on your finger here and see if it bends. That's nice and good. And a little pull test here, just a little bit of a tug. Oh, that's going to be good. That's going to be really good. I'm going to go ahead and finish slicing this up, and when I get to the point, I'll show you how to cut the point. Okay, so I basically separated the flat from the point, and if we take a look at the point here, you can zoom in there, you can see just how juicy that point is. Super, super juicy. I'm going to go ahead and finish slicing this up, and we'll show you what it looks like when we're all done. I just had to show you this. I actually cut the point in half, and man, is this thing juicy. It's just oozing juice. So good. I'm super excited to try this out. So far the difference between foil and butcher paper, definitely really juicy with the foil. Bark's not as crisp. I'm gonna finish this one more time. I'm gonna finish this, and we'll get to taste it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and taste this. I cut a piece off the point. Super good, really well seasoned, super juicy. Very tender, very good. I'm not sure which I like better, foil or butcher paper. I think the next time I do one, I'll do butcher paper, and then we'll put that up and we can do a comparison. In the meantime, watch me work, baby. Watch me work.